Welcome to Story Tales. Please like this video and subscribe to Story Tales. I hope you enjoy the story. Let's begin.
The dining room smelled like roasted turkey and simmering resentment. Camille Draper sat at the polished mahogany table, her hands folded in her lap, watching her mother-in-law arrange the silverware with military precision. 8 years of marriage to Silas, and Maureen Draper still treated her like an unwelcome guest who had overstayed her welcome. "Camille, dear, could you pass the cranberry sauce?" Maureen's voice dripped with false sweetness. Her silver hair was pulled back in a bun so tight it stretched the skin around her eyes. "Though I suppose you're not familiar with the real thing. This isn't from a can." Camille reached for the crystal bowl without flinching. "Of course, Maureen. It looks lovely. Mother made it from scratch." Noelle chimed in from across the table. Silas's younger sister had mastered the art of agreeing with whoever held the most power in the room. Today that was clearly Maureen. She got the recipe from her grandmother. Juniper Holt, Camille's best friend since high school, shot her a look that said stay calm. Juniper had witnessed enough Draper family gatherings to know how these conversations went. She picked up her wine glass and took a sip, her eyes never leaving Maureen's face. "That's wonderful," Camille said. "Family traditions are important." Maureen's smile sharpened. "Yes, they are. Real family traditions. The ones that matter." Alaric Draper cleared his throat from the head of the table. Silas's father rarely spoke during these family dinners, content to let his wife orchestrate the social warfare. He carved the turkey with steady hands, his gray mustache twitching slightly when Maureen's barbs grew too obvious. "More wine, anyone?" Alaric asked, reaching for the bottle. "Please," Juniper said, extending her glass. "This is excellent. Where did you get it?" "Napa Valley," Silas said, finally speaking up. He'd been quiet through most of dinner, his jaw tight as he watched his mother circle Camille like a predator. "We went there for our anniversary last year." "Your anniversary," Maureen repeated, her voice flat. "How lovely. Though I still think a proper couple would have chosen somewhere more traditional, like Paris or Rome." Camille cut a piece of turkey, her movements deliberate and calm. "Napa was perfect for us. We enjoyed the wine tours." "Of course you did," Maureen said, "though I'm sure the expense was—" "Mother." Silas's voice carried a warning edge. Maureen's eyes glittered. She leaned forward slightly, her hands clasped in front of her. "I'm simply saying that some people appreciate the finer things in life, while others, well, they make do with what they can afford." The words hung in the air like smoke. Camille felt Juniper tense beside her, ready to defend, but Camille squeezed her friend's leg under the table. "Not yet." "You're right," Camille said, meeting Maureen's gaze directly. "Some people do know the difference between quality and pretense." Noelle's fork clattered against her plate. Alaric took a large gulp of wine. Silas stared at his wife with a mixture of pride and alarm. Maureen's face flushed pink above her pearl necklace. "Well, I suppose we all have our own perspectives on what constitutes quality." "We do," Camille agreed. "And time usually reveals who was right." The silence stretched like a wire about to snap. Maureen's lips pressed into a thin line. She turned to Silas, her voice dropping to what she thought was a whisper. "She's been cheating on you." The words carried across the quiet table like a gunshot. "Don't let her humiliate you." Camille saw the change in Silas's face immediately. His eyes went wide, then narrow. His hand, resting beside his plate, clenched into a fist. She watched him process his mother's words, watched the anger build behind his eyes like steam in a kettle. The slap came fast and sharp. His open palm caught her across the left cheek with enough force to snap her head to the side. The sound cracked through the dining room like a branch breaking. Camille's ear rang. Her cheek burned. She felt herself stumble sideways, her hip catching the edge of the table. Silverware rattled against china. The room erupted in gasps and movement. Jesus, Silas. Alaric's voice cut through the chaos. Oh my God, Noelle whispered, her hand pressed to her mouth. Juniper started to rise from her chair, but Camille held up one hand to stop her. Slowly, deliberately, Camille straightened up. She turned to face her husband, who stood frozen beside his chair, his hand still raised, his face pale with shock at his own action. Camille smiled. The same polite smile she'd worn through 8 years of Maureen's insults and Silas's silences. Thank you. The words dropped into the silence like stones into still water. Camille reached for her napkin with steady hands. She folded it neatly and placed it beside her plate, the same way Maureen had taught her 8 years ago when she was still trying to belong. Camille. Silas started, his voice cracking. She stood up slowly, her movements calm and controlled. Every eye in the room followed her as she walked to the hallway closet and pulled out her black wool coat. Her heels clicked against the hardwood floor as she returned to the dining room doorway. Thank you for dinner, she said to the room at large. The turkey was perfect. She didn't look at Silas. She didn't look at Maureen. She walked out the front door and closed it softly behind her. The November air bit at her face, making her injured cheek throb. She pulled out her car keys and unlocked her Honda Civic, the car Maureen had once described as quaint, in a tone that suggested it was anything but. Inside the car, Camille sat for a moment in the silence. She pulled down the visor mirror and examined her reflection. The left side of her face was already swelling, a red handprint clearly visible against her pale skin. Now you've done it in front of witnesses, she whispered to herself. Her phone buzzed with a text from Juniper. Should I come after you? Camille typed back quickly. Don't defend me. Just watch and remember everything. She started the engine and pulled away from the Draper house, its windows glowing warm and golden against the dark street. In her rear-view mirror, she could see a figure standing in the doorway, probably Silas, finally finding the courage to follow her. But it was too late for that now. Camille's apartment was small but clean, the kind of place that Maureen would call adequate, while implying it was anything but. She'd kept it when she married Silas, telling him she needed somewhere to paint. He'd agreed, though he'd never understood why she needed space away from their house. Tonight, she understood perfectly. She went straight to the bathroom and turned on all the lights. Under the harsh fluorescent bulbs, the damage was even clearer. Her left cheek was swollen and starting to bruise. The mark of Silas's hand was still visible, for fingers and a thumb printed across her skin like a signature. Camille pulled out her phone and started taking pictures. Front view, side view, close-ups of the bruising. She took dozens of photos from every possible angle, making sure the timestamp was clearly visible in each one. When she was satisfied with the documentation, she scrolled through her contacts and found Riley's number. Her younger brother was a patrol officer in Camden, 2 towns over. He'd joined the police force right out of high school, driven by the same sense of justice that had made him defend her against playground bullies when they were kids. She attached the clearest photos and sent them with a simple message. Happy Thanksgiving. Her phone rang within minutes. Cam, what the hell happened? Riley's voice was tight with anger. She could picture him in his small apartment, probably still in his uniform from his Thanksgiving shift. Silas hit me, she said simply, in front of his whole family. That son of a bitch. Where are you? Are you safe? I'm at my apartment. I'm fine. That's assault, Cam. He's in trouble. Big trouble. Camille sat down on her couch, still holding the phone to her ear. I know. You need to press charges. Tonight. The sooner you report it, the better your case will be. I will. But I need to do this right. Riley was quiet for a moment. When he spoke again, his voice was careful. What do you mean, right? I mean, I don't want just a charge, Riley. I want a conviction. Okay, that's good. That's what I want too. But you need to move fast. Evidence deteriorates, witnesses forget. The witnesses won't forget this. Another pause. Cam, what aren't you telling me? Camille touched her swollen cheek, gently. Maureen set him up. She whispered something to him right before he hit me. Something about me cheating, which is complete bullshit. She wanted him to react, and he did. Jesus. That's conspiracy. Intimidation. Maybe even harassment. But proving what she said will be hard, right? Unless someone heard her clearly enough to testify to it. Yeah. Someone did hear her. Camille smiled, even though it hurt her face. Several someones. Her phone buzzed with an incoming call. Juniper's name flashed on the screen. Riley, I need to take this. Can I call you back? Sure. But Cam, don't wait too long to report this. And don't clean yourself up or ice that bruise until after you've been to the police station. I won't. Thanks, Riley. She switched to Juniper's call. Are you okay? I'm fine. What happened after I left? Juniper's voice was shaky. It was insane. Silas just stood there staring at the door. Maureen kept saying it was your fault for provoking him. But Alaric told her to shut up. And Noelle. God, Camille, Noelle looked like she was going to throw up. Did anyone say anything about what Maureen whispered to him? Alaric asked her what she said. She tried to deny it at first, but he kept pushing. Finally, she admitted she told Silas you were cheating. In front of everyone. Yeah, Noelle called her a liar. Said Maureen was just trying to cause trouble. It was the first time I've ever seen her stand up to her mother. Camille leaned back against her couch cushions. Did you hear what Maureen said originally? When she whispered to Silas. Most of it. She said you were cheating and that Silas shouldn't let you humiliate him. Would you be willing to testify to that? Juniper didn't hesitate. Absolutely. That family has treated you like garbage for 8 years. It's time someone held them accountable. There's something else. I need you to think carefully about this, because it's important. Did you record anything tonight? What do you mean? With your phone. Any video or audio from dinner. Juniper was quiet for so long that Camille thought the call had dropped. Juniper. Yes. I was taking a video of the table. For the family moment thing. I do it every year for my mom. Her voice got smaller. Oh my God, Camille. I think I got it. I think I got the whole thing. Camille closed her eyes. Everything. The whisper, the slap, your reaction. All of it. Don't delete that video. Don't let anyone else see it. Can you email it to yourself right now as a backup? Already doing it. Camille, this is huge. I know. Camille touched her cheek again, feeling the heat radiating from the bruise. I know exactly how huge it is. Noelle Draper lived in a converted carriage house behind her parents' main property, arrangement that kept her close enough for Maureen's supervision, but far enough away to maintain the illusion of independence. Camille had always suspected that Noelle's proximity wasn't entirely voluntary. The next morning, Camille parked outside the carriage house and checked her reflection in the visor mirror. The bruising had deepened overnight, turning her left cheek purple and yellow. Perfect. She knocked on Noelle's door at exactly 9 o'clock. Through the window, she could see Noelle moving around inside, probably debating whether to answer. The door opened slowly. Noelle's face was pale, her hair uncombed. She wore yesterday's clothes and looked like she hadn't slept. Camille. Noelle's voice was barely a whisper. I wasn't sure if how are you feeling? Like I got slapped by your brother in front of his entire family. Noelle flinched. Do you want to come in? Camille stepped inside the small living room. The space was decorated in soft pastels and vintage furniture. Noelle's attempt to create something different from her mother's rigid formality. It almost worked. Coffee? Noelle asked, wrapping her arms around herself. No thanks. I won't be here long. They stood facing each other in the middle of the room. Noelle kept glancing at Camille's bruised face, then looking away quickly. I'm sorry, Noelle said finally. About what Silas did. about what my mother said, about all of it. Are you sorry enough to do something about it? Noelle's eyes widened. What do you mean? I'm pressing charges against Silas. Assault. I need witnesses who saw what happened and heard what your mother said to provoke him. Camille, I don't think. This isn't a request, Noelle. Camille's voice stayed calm, but her words carried the weight of 8 years of accumulated anger. This is me telling you how this is going to work. Noelle sat down heavily on her couch. You can't be serious. I've never been more serious about anything in my life. Camille remained standing. Your brother hit me, in front of witnesses, after your mother deliberately provoked him with lies. That's assault, and it's going to court. But it's family. No, it's not. Camille's voice hardened. Family doesn't treat people the way your family has treated me. Family doesn't whisper lies to provoke violence. And family sure as hell doesn't stand by and watch someone get hit without consequences. Noelle's hands shook as she pushed her hair back from her face. My mother will disown me if I testify against Silas. And I'll make sure everyone in this town knows you chose your brother's side after watching him assault someone. Camille sat down across from Noelle, her voice dropping to a conversational tone. But here's what I think, Noelle. I think you're tired of being under Silas's shadow. I think you're tired of your mother controlling every aspect of your life. I think you want out from under all of it. Noelle stared at her hands. It's not that simple. It's exactly that simple. You testify to what you saw and heard the truth, and you start building a life that's actually yours. Or you protect Silas, and you spend the rest of your life being Maureen's puppet. What if they cut me off financially? Then you'll figure it out, like the rest of us do. Camille leaned forward. You have a college degree. You're smart. You're 28 years old, for God's sake. How long are you going to let them treat you like a child? Noelle was quiet for a long time. Outside, a car door slammed, probably someone visiting the main house. The sound made both women look toward the window. What exactly would I have to testify to? Noelle asked finally. The truth, that your mother whispered to Silas right before he hit me. That she told him I was cheating, which is a lie. That Silas hit me without any provocation from me. That I remained calm and didn't retaliate. And that's it. That's it. Just what you saw and heard. Noelle rubbed her temples. My mother will never forgive me. Your mother hasn't forgiven you for being born, Noelle. She's been controlling you with the threat of disapproval your entire life. The only difference is that now you'd be choosing to disappoint her for something that matters. Another long silence. Noelle stood up and walked to the window, looking toward the main house where she'd grown up. If I do this, she said without turning around, there's no going back, is there? No, Camille said. There isn't. Noelle turned around slowly. Her face was pale but determined. What do I need to do? Juniper worked as a paralegal at a small law firm in downtown Brunswick. Her office was cramped and cluttered, but it had a computer with a secure server connection and access to legal databases. More importantly, it had privacy. Camille met her there at 11 o'clock, after the morning rush but before the lunch crowd. Juniper's boss was in court, and the other paralegal was out sick, so they had the place to themselves. I've been thinking about this all night, Juniper said, leading Camille to her desk. The video is good, really good, but we need to be careful about how we handle it. She pulled up the video file on her computer. The footage was shaky and sometimes out of frame. Juniper had been trying to film casually while eating, but the audio was clear. See, here's where it starts, Juniper said, pointing to the timestamp. I was trying to get everyone at the table, but the phone was angled more toward where you and Silas were sitting. The video showed the Draper dining room from Juniper's perspective. Camille could see herself in profile, cutting her turkey with careful precision. Maureen's voice was audible in the background, making her comment about making do with what you can afford. Here, Juniper said, moving the cursor forward. This is where you told her that time reveals who was right. Watch Maureen's face. On screen, Maureen's expression shifted from smug superiority to barely contained rage. She turned toward Silas, leaning close to his ear. She's been cheating on you. Don't let her humiliate you. The words were crystal clear in the recording. Camille watched herself see the change in Silas's face, watched the moment of recognition before his hand lashed out. The slap sounded even louder on the recording than it had in person. The sharp crack was followed immediately by the clatter of silverware and Alaric's shocked, "Jesus, Silas!" What struck Camille most was her own reaction. On screen, she straightened up slowly, turned to face Silas and smiled. "Thank you." The words were calm, clear, and completely controlled. "That's incredible," Camille said. "You can hear everything." "Including Maureen's admission afterward," Juniper said, fast-forwarding the video. When Alaric confronted her about what she said. The later part of the recording was chaos, multiple voices talking over each other, chair scraping, movement around the table. But Maureen's voice cut through it all when Alaric demanded to know what she'd told Silas. "I told him his wife was making a fool of him." Maureen's voice was defensive but clear. Someone needed to open his eyes. "She was lying," Noelle's voice stronger than usual. "Camille isn't cheating on anyone. Mother was just trying to start trouble." "The girl's been nothing but trouble since she walked into this family." Maureen shot back. Juniper paused the video. "That's all of it. The whole thing from start to finish." Camille stared at the frozen image on the screen. "How do we make sure this holds up in court?" "Chain of custody," Juniper said. "We need to document exactly when this was recorded, who has had access to it, and how it's been stored. I've already made 3 backup copies on different servers, each with a timestamp verification." "Is that enough?" "It should be, especially with witness testimony to back it up. But your brother was right, we need to move fast. The longer we wait, the more opportunity there is for someone to claim the video was altered or edited." Camille pulled out her phone and scrolled to Riley's number. "I'm calling my brother. I want him to walk me through exactly how to file charges and what evidence I need to bring." Riley answered on the first ring. "How are you feeling?" "Like I'm ready to put my husband in jail." Camille put the phone on speaker so Juniper could hear. "What do I need to know about filing charges?" "First, you need to go to the police station and file a formal complaint. Bring the photos you took last night, any medical documentation if you've seen a doctor, and any witnesses who can provide statements." "I haven't seen a doctor." "You should. Get the injury documented by a medical professional. Even if it's just bruising, having official documentation strengthens your case." Juniper leaned toward the phone. "Riley, this is Juniper. I have video evidence of the assault. What's the best way to preserve it for court?" "Jesus, you have video? That's huge. You need to get that to the police as part of your initial report. They'll handle the chain of custody from there." "What about getting copies to a lawyer?" "You should definitely get a lawyer, but let the police handle the evidence first. Once charges are filed, you can work with a prosecutor." Camille looked at her watch. It was almost noon. "If I go to the police station this afternoon, how quickly can they arrest Silas?" "If you have solid evidence and witness statements, they could have a warrant by tonight." Camille felt something cold and satisfied settle in her chest. "Good. Cam, are you sure about this? Once you file charges, there's no taking it back. Your marriage will be over." "My marriage has been over for years, Riley. I just needed Silas to make it official." The Brunswick Police Department was a brick building that looked like it had been built in the 1960s and hadn't been updated since. The waiting area smelled like disinfectant and stale coffee. Camille sat in a plastic chair, a manila folder full of evidence on her lap, and waited for her name to be called. She'd spent the lunch hour at an urgent care clinic. where a nurse practitioner had documented her injuries and taken additional photographs. The official medical report described facial bruising consistent with blunt force trauma and soft tissue swelling indicating recent impact. The clinical language made the violence sound sterile and legal. Camille Draper? A detective in his 40s approached her, wearing a rumpled suit and tired eyes. His badge identified him as Detective Warren Mills. "That's me. I'm Detective Mills. I understand you'd like to file a complaint." She followed him to a small interview room with fluorescent lighting and a metal table. He offered her coffee, which she declined, then pulled out a legal pad and a digital recorder. "Let's start with the basics," Detective Mills said. "What happened, and when did it happen?" Camille opened her folder and placed the medical report on the table. "Yesterday evening, November 28th, at approximately 7:30 p.m., my husband Silas Draper struck me across the face during Thanksgiving dinner at his parents' house." Detective Mills made notes as she spoke. "Were there witnesses?" "Yes. His parents, Alaric and Maureen Draper, his sister, Noelle Draper, and my friend, Juniper Holt." "Can you describe what led up to the assault?" Camille had rehearsed this part. She kept her voice steady and factual. "We were having dinner. Silas's mother, Maureen, was making deliberately provocative comments toward me. When I responded calmly, she became angry. She leaned over and whispered something to Silas, after which he immediately hit me." "What did she whisper?" "She told him I was cheating on him and that he shouldn't let me humiliate him." "This is false. I have never cheated on my husband." Detective Mills looked up from his notes. "You heard this clearly?" "Yes, and so did the other witnesses." "What was your husband's demeanor before his mother spoke to him?" "Uncomfortable, but not aggressive. He only became violent after she whispered to him." Detective Mills continued taking notes. "What did you do after he hit you?" "I left immediately. I came home, documented my injuries, and contacted my brother, who is a police officer in Camden." "Riley Holt?" "That's right. Do you know him?" "We've worked cases together. Good cop." Detective Mills set down his pen. "Mrs. Draper, I have to ask, have there been previous incidents of domestic violence in your marriage?" Camille had expected this question. "No. Silas has never hit me before, but his family has engaged in a pattern of emotional abuse and harassment for the 8 years we've been married." "Can you provide more details about that?" "Constant criticism, social exclusion, financial manipulation through my husband. Nothing criminal, but a clear pattern of behavior designed to make me feel unwelcome and inferior." Detective Mills nodded. "And you believe yesterday's incident was an escalation of that pattern?" "I believe Maureen Draper deliberately provoked her son into hitting me because she wanted to cause a scene that would end my marriage." "That's a serious accusation." "I have evidence." Camille pulled out her phone and connected it to the charging cable Detective Mills provided. She played Juniper's video, watching his face as he listened to Maureen's whisper and the sharp crack of the slap that followed. When the video ended, Detective Mills was quiet for a long moment. "This is very clear," he said finally. "Audio and visual evidence of both the provocation and the assault. My friend Juniper recorded it inadvertently while filming the dinner. She's provided a sworn statement about the circumstances. And you have witness statements from the other people present." "Noelle Draper has agreed to testify about what she saw and heard. I believe Alaric Draper would also provide an accurate account if questioned officially." Detective Mills rewound the video and played it again, focusing on the audio of Maureen's whisper. "This shows clear premeditation on Mrs. Maureen Draper's part." "Does that matter legally?" "It could. Conspiracy to commit assault, intimidation, harassment. There are several charges that could apply to her actions as well as your husband's." Camille felt a surge of satisfaction. "I want to press charges against both of them." "Let's focus on your husband first. The assault charge is straightforward with this evidence. We can look at additional charges against his mother once we've built the primary case. Detective Mills finished his notes and turned off the recorder. Mrs. Draper, I'm going to be direct with you. This is a strong case. With the video evidence and witness testimony, we have an excellent chance of conviction. But prosecuting your husband will likely end your marriage and create significant conflict with his family. Good. He raised an eyebrow. You're certain about this? Detective Mills, I've spent 8 years being patient and forgiving and trying to make peace with people who have never wanted me around. Yesterday, they crossed a line. I'm done being the bigger person. Understood. He gathered his papers and stood up. I'll have the paperwork prepared for charges this afternoon. We'll likely have a warrant issued by early evening. How long before he's arrested? Depends on where he is and whether he comes voluntarily. If he's at home, we could have him in custody by tonight. Camille picked up her folder and followed him toward the door. Will I be notified when he's arrested? Yes, and you'll be contacted about when to appear for the initial hearing. She paused at the door of the interview room. Detective Mills, when you arrest him, can you tell him something for me? That depends on what it is. Camille smiled the same calm smile she'd worn at the dinner table. Tell him I said thank you. The Cumberland County Courthouse was built of gray stone and had the kind of imposing architecture designed to remind everyone inside that justice was serious business. Camille climbed the front steps in a navy blue suit she'd bought specifically for this day. Conservative enough to look respectable, fitted enough to show she wasn't broken. 2 months had passed since Thanksgiving. 2 months of depositions, witness interviews, and pretrial motions. 2 months of Silas sitting in county jail because his assault charge had been upgraded to aggravated assault when the prosecutor saw the video evidence. 2 months of Maureen Draper's lawyers trying unsuccessfully to get Juniper's recording excluded from evidence. The courtroom was packed. Small-town domestic violence cases rarely drew this much attention, but the Drapers were prominent enough in Brunswick to make the local news. Camille could see reporters with notebooks scattered throughout the gallery. You ready for this? Riley asked, adjusting his tie. He'd taken leave from his patrol duties to be present for the trial. I've been ready for 2 months. Prosecutor Amanda Chun approached their table. She was young, but had a reputation for being thorough and aggressive. I've reviewed everything one more time. Your witness testimony is solid, the video evidence is irrefutable, and the defense doesn't have much to work with. What's their strategy? Camille asked. Provocation. They're going to argue that you deliberately antagonized Mrs. Maureen Draper and that Silas was defending his family's honor. Based on what? Your response to his mother's comments at dinner. They'll claim you were being deliberately disrespectful and that any reasonable person would have been upset. Camille almost laughed. So their defense is that I deserve to be hit for talking back. Essentially, yes. It's not a great defense, but it's all they have. The bailiff called for everyone to rise as Judge Patricia Winters entered courtroom. She was a woman in her 50s with steel-gray hair and a reputation for running an efficient courtroom. The case of the state versus Silas Draper, case number 2024, CR 4751, the clerk announced. Camille looked across the aisle at her husband. Silas had lost weight during his 2 months in jail. His expensive suit hung loose on his frame, and there were dark circles under his eyes. When he turned to look at her, she met his gaze steadily and didn't look away till he looked away first. Your Honor, Prosecutor Chin began, the state will prove that on November 28th, 2024, the defendant, Silas Draper, committed aggravated assault against his wife, Camille Draper, in full view of multiple witnesses. We will show that this assault was unprovoked and was the direct result of manipulation by the defendant's mother, Maureen Draper. The defense attorney, a man named Robert Sterling, who specialized in getting wealthy people out of trouble, stood to make his opening statement. Your Honor, My client deeply regrets the events of November 28th. But the evidence will show that Mr. Draper was subjected to extreme provocation by a wife who deliberately antagonized his family during what should have been a peaceful holiday gathering. While Mr. Draper's reaction was inappropriate, it was the understandable response of a man who was publicly humiliated and disrespected. Judge Winters looked unimpressed. "Counsel, I hope you have more than she asked for it as your defense strategy." "We do, Your Honor. We believe the evidence will show that Mrs. Draper's behavior was calculated to provoke exactly this kind of reaction. We'll see. Prosecutor Chen, call your first witness." The state calls Juniper Holt. Juniper walked to the witness stand wearing a black dress and minimal makeup. She'd been nervous about testifying, but as she raised her right hand to be sworn in, her voice was steady. Prosecutor Chen led her through the events of Thanksgiving dinner, establishing the timeline and the people present. Then she got to the crucial moment. "Ms. Holt, can you describe what happened immediately before Mr. Draper struck his wife?" Mrs. Maureen Draper leaned over and whispered something to Silas. I could hear her clearly from where I was sitting. "What did she say?" "She said, she's been cheating on you. Don't let her humiliate you." What was Mr. Draper's reaction? He looked shocked first, then angry. Then he hit Camille across the face. How would you describe the force of this blow? It was hard enough to knock her sideways into the table, hard enough that silverware fell off plates. What was Mrs. Draper's reaction to being struck? She stood up slowly, looked at Silas, and said, "Thank you." Then she left. Prosecutor Chen played the video for the court. In the silent courtroom, Maureen's whisper came through clearly, followed by the sharp crack of the slap. Several people in the gallery winced at the sound. "Ms. Holt, is this an accurate recording of what you witnessed?" "Yes, that's exactly what happened." During cross-examination, Sterling tried to suggest that Camille had been deliberately provoking Maureen throughout dinner. "Isn't it true that Mrs. Draper was making sarcastic comments to Mrs. Maureen Draper?" She was responding to Mrs. Maureen Draper's insults. But she was being confrontational, wasn't she? She was being polite but firm. Mrs. Maureen Draper had been making nasty comments all evening, and Camille was finally standing up for herself. "So you admit she was being confrontational?" Juniper's voice hardened. "I admit she was refusing to be bullied. If you want to call that confrontational, then yes." The state calls Noelle Draper. Noelle's testimony was devastating to the defense. She confirmed Juniper's account of the dinner conversation and her mother's whisper to Silas. But more importantly, she provided context for the family dynamics. "Ms. Draper, how would you characterize your mother's relationship with the defendant's wife?" "My mother has never accepted Camille. She spent 8 years trying to make Camille feel unwelcome in our family." "Can you give specific examples?" "Constant criticism about her clothes, her job, her background. Comments about how Silas married beneath himself. Deliberate exclusion from family events and conversations." In your opinion, was your mother's whisper to your brother intended to provoke a reaction? Absolutely. My mother knew Silas would react badly to hearing that Camille was cheating, especially since it wasn't true. You're certain the accusation was false? Completely certain. Camille has never cheated on my brother. My mother made it up to cause trouble. Sterling's cross-examination of Noelle was gentler. She was still a Draper, after all, but no less damaging to his case. "Ms. Draper, isn't it possible your mother genuinely believed Mrs. Draper was having an affair?" "No. My mother admitted afterward that she said it to open his eyes about his wife. She didn't believe it was true. She just wanted to hurt Camille." The state calls Alaric Draper. This was the witness Camille had been most uncertain about. Silas's father had always been the quiet one, the peacekeeper who avoided confrontation. But when he took the stand, something had changed in his demeanor. "Mr. Draper, you are the defendant's father." "I am." Were you present for the Thanksgiving dinner in question? Yes. Can you describe what you witnessed? Alaric looked directly at his son as he spoke. I saw my wife deliberately provoke my son into hitting his wife. Then I watched him do it. The courtroom stirred. Even Prosecutor Chin looked surprised by the directness of his answer. Can you be more specific about how your wife provoked your son? She whispered lies to him about Camille cheating. She knew Silas would react badly and she wanted him to. How do you know the accusations were lies? Because my wife told me afterward that she made them up. She said someone needed to show Silas what his wife was really like. Prosecutor Chin glanced at her notes. This was new information, not covered in Alaric's pre-trial deposition. Mr. Draper, when did your wife tell you this? That night after Camille left. I confronted Maureen about what she'd done, and she admitted she'd lied to Silas. What exactly did she say? Alaric's voice was flat and tired. She said she'd been waiting years for an opportunity to get rid of Camille, and that this was her chance. She said if Silas hit her in front of witnesses, Camille would finally leave. The defense table erupted. Sterling was on his feet immediately. Objection! This is hearsay, Your Honor. Your Honor, Prosecutor Chin countered. This testimony goes to the premeditated nature of the assault. Mrs. Maureen Draper's statements to her husband are admissions against interest. Judge Winters considered for a moment. I'll allow it. The jury will consider the testimony for what weight they believe it deserves. Sterling sat down heavily. His entire defense strategy had just collapsed. Mr. Draper, are you saying your wife planned this assault? I'm saying my wife deliberately created a situation designed to destroy my son's marriage, and she succeeded. The cross-examination was brief. Sterling couldn't challenge Alaric's testimony without admitting that Maureen had indeed lied to provoke Silas. The state calls Camille Draper. Camille walked to the witness stand with steady steps. The courtroom was completely silent as she was sworn in. Prosecutor Chen's direct examination covered the basic facts of the case: the dinner, the escalating conversation, Maureen's whisper, and the assault itself. But then she asked the question that cut to the heart of the matter. Mrs. Draper, why did you say, "Thank you," after your husband hit you? Camille looked directly at the jury as she answered. Because he'd finally done something in front of witnesses that I could use to get away from his family. Can you explain what you mean? I'd spent 8 years trying to be the perfect daughter-in-law to people who never wanted me there. I'd been patient and forgiving and understanding. I'd made excuses for their behavior and blamed myself for not trying hard enough. Camille's voice was calm but firm. When Silas hit me, he gave me something I'd never had before, proof that their treatment of me had consequences. So I thanked him. Were you surprised that he hit you? No. I was surprised it took 8 years. Sterling's cross-examination was aggressive, but ineffective. He tried to paint Camille as calculating and manipulative, someone who had deliberately provoked the assault for her own purposes. Isn't it true that you were planning to leave your husband anyway? No. I was planning to keep trying to make my marriage work. But you immediately began documenting evidence and contacting lawyers. I immediately began protecting myself from further violence. You took photographs, collected video evidence, lined up witnesses, all within hours of the alleged assault. I did what any intelligent person would do after being assaulted in front of witnesses. You seem remarkably composed for someone who claims to be a victim of domestic violence. Camille's voice turned ice cold. Mr. Sterling, I've been a victim of abuse from your client's family for 8 years. The only difference is that this time there were witnesses. The jury deliberated for 3 hours. Camille spent the time in a small conference room with Prosecutor Chen and Riley, trying not to think about what would happen if Silas was acquitted. It's a strong case, Chen assured her for the 10th time. The video evidence alone is enough for conviction. But juries can be unpredictable, Riley added, ever the pessimist. Not with evidence this clear, Chin said, and Alaric's testimony sealed it. When the defendant's own father testifies that the assault was premeditated manipulation, that's case over. A bailiff knocked on the door. Jury's back. The courtroom was even more packed than it had been that morning. Word had spread about Alaric's testimony, and people wanted to see how the story ended. Has the jury reached a verdict? Judge Winters asked. The foreman, a middle-aged woman who worked at the local bank, stood up. We have, Your Honor. What say you to the charge of aggravated assault? We find the defendant guilty. The courtroom erupted in noise. Silas dropped his head into his hands. Maureen, sitting in the front row, let out a sound that was part gasp, part sob. Camille felt nothing but cold satisfaction. Judge Winters banged her gavel for order. The defendant will remain in custody pending sentencing, which is scheduled for January 15th. Court is adjourned. As the courtroom emptied, reporters surrounded Camille outside the building. She'd been dreading this moment, but now that it was here, she felt strangely calm. Mrs. Draper, how do you feel about the verdict? Justice was served. Do you have any regrets about prosecuting your husband? None whatsoever. Some people are saying you could have handled this privately within the family. What's your response? Camille stopped walking and turned to face the cameras. 8 years ago, I married into a family that never wanted me. I spent those years trying to be patient, trying to be understanding, trying to make peace with people who saw me as an enemy. I was told that family problems should stay in the family, that I should be more forgiving, that I should try harder. She paused, letting her words sink in. Yesterday, a jury of 12 people watched video evidence of my husband hitting me after his mother deliberately provoked him with lies. They saw a clear case of domestic violence, and they held him accountable for it. That's not a family problem, that's a crime. And crimes have consequences. What about your mother-in-law's role in this? Maureen Draper spent 8 years trying to destroy my marriage through manipulation and emotional abuse. She finally succeeded, just not in the way she intended. Will you be pursuing charges against her as well? That's a decision for the prosecutor's office. Do you feel sorry for your husband? Camille smiled the same calm smile she'd worn at the Thanksgiving table. No, he earned every second of it. She walked away from the cameras, leaving the Drapers' once perfect image shattered on the courthouse steps. Juniper caught up to her at her car. How does it feel? Like I can finally breathe again. What now? Camille unlocked her car and looked back at the courthouse where her husband would be sentenced to 9 months in county jail with mandatory anger management and a permanent restraining order. Now, I'm thinking dinner, maybe some pie. She got into her car and rolled down the window. I've got something to celebrate. As she drove away, Camille could see the Drapers in her rearview mirror, standing on the courthouse steps like strangers suddenly aware that their world had shifted permanently beneath their feet. For the first time in 8 years, Camille Draper was exactly where she wanted to be.